just a couple more minutes to get out of the waiting room and into our main room, and then we'll get started.
Can I ask a question while you're waiting?
Sure, Sue.
You heard about the DOE rule change on the majority vote?
Yes, ma'am. We'll actually mention that towards the end of the presentation.
Okay, I think that's pretty critical. Thanks.
So it looks like everybody's come in from the waiting room, so we'll get started. I just want to welcome all of you and thank you for joining us today for this really important discussion about conversion charter schools. My name is Kathy Boehm. I work for the Florida Education Association as a legislative specialist. I'm delighted to be able to open this event. We have an exciting agenda lined up. We've got some fabulous speakers and very knowledgeable folks who can share their insights about practical experience with conversion charter school process. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize our sponsors for this event: the Families for Strong Public Schools, the Florida Education Association, and the League of Women Voters of Florida are all sponsoring the event and all participating as well. Just for housekeeping purposes, if you're having trouble with audio or video, then there is a button down on the bottom left that you can try to manipulate to see if you can get things working properly. You should be able to adjust it there. We are using the chat feature, but we would encourage you to allow the meeting presenters to present and put questions in, and then we'll come back and try to address questions. We've set aside time at the end to do that. Also, if you would just keep your microphone on mute unless you're speaking, then that will reduce background noise so everybody can hear a little bit better. So let's start with an overview tonight of Florida's current policies governing charter school conversion. And then following that, we'll have some guests from Alachua County, and then we'll go into our question and answer. So to begin, I'd like to introduce Andrew Sprar, who is president of the Florida Education Association, who will be introducing the evening. Andrew?
Thank you, Kathy, and good evening, everyone. I really appreciate everyone being on this call and really learning more about what's going on in Florida and really what I see as an attack on public education. We have seen for a while in Florida a continued push to divert dollars away from public schools. And tonight we're going to be talking specifically about the effects of these conversion charters and the laws that have been put in place to really, once again, encourage the shutting down of public schools and the conversion to charter schools, which very often have less regulation, less oversight, and at the end of the day, less parent input. And I think it's important that we understand and look at what is happening in Florida and the impact that it's ultimately having on schools and on communities. But we've known this for a long time, as much as politicians may say that charter schools are public schools. The reality of it is charter schools are run by for-profit companies who then use public taxpayer dollars to make decisions on how those schools will operate. They decide what students will be allowed to attend. They decide what curriculum they're going to use, and they decide ultimately what that school is going to accomplish. And if at some point the charter school company that's managing that school decides they don't appreciate a parent who's speaking up against them, they can remove those students from those parents' children from that school. And so that's really concerning. And what we've seen happen in Alachua most recently is an attempt to convert a public school. And because it didn't go the way that some wanted it to go, they're now petitioning the state and to change the rules. And that's what we see happen all the time. If it doesn't go the way the money people want it to go, they just simply use their money power to change the rules and to buy influence to change those rules. And so I think it's really important that as we have this conversation this evening, we keep in the back of our heads the idea of people power, the idea that people power actually outweighs everything else. And people power means organizing people together, bringing people together, and making sure that everyone understands what's happening. Because at the end of the day, what the people want is strong public schools in every community. Public schools that are accountable to a local school board. Public schools that meet the constitutional obligation to ensure that every child that comes through our schools' doors is getting the education they deserve and need. And so as we're talking about charter conversions, as we're talking about the changing of rules and how it creates this unfair playing field, if you will, let's think about how we also respond to that and how we organize in our community to make sure that we actually have schools that serve every child in our community, and that we have public schools that are accountable to parents and to voters, and not charter schools that are run, and quite honestly private schools too, but that are often run by for-profit companies whose intent is to make money. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kathy.
Thank you, Andrew, for setting the stage for tonight's discussion. One of the things that we thought was important was that we had a common understanding of what a charter school is, what a conversion charter school is, and what state statute says about that. And so I'm going to do just a real quick overview of the policy, statutory policy. It will be a PowerPoint, and it will be available after the meeting so that all of you, if you'd like to go back and read up on the statutes and read up on the policy, then you can. So first, just to start with some definitions. Charter schools, we all know, are called by the state public schools because they are funded by taxpayer dollars. They are established as a nonprofit corporation by law in Florida, but that doesn't prevent them from contracting with for-profit operators for both the building and the facilities itself. So they can actually establish policies for admission. They can set enrollment caps. They can set all kinds of policies within a statutory framework. And they may establish lottery preferences, again, within statute. So they're able to select the students that attend. We have things called charter school authorizers and charter school sponsors. And sometimes we get the two of them mixed up. So the charter school authorizer is the entity that reviews a charter school that would like to establish a school. So they have to write a plan that's outlined in statute, and it basically talks about their financial and their educational soundness, just the plans that they have. The school district can be the authorizer, but the state established a charter school review commission a couple of years ago because many charter schools were having trouble getting their plan done. And so now, instead of going through school districts, they can go through this charter school review commission instead. So there are two routes now to becoming a charter school. Once you are a charter school, the sponsor becomes the school district in most cases. And so even if the school district did not think your plan was going to lead to a successful school, once the plan is approved, they are then responsible for the performance of that school, although they have very little authority to actually regulate what happens inside the charter school. A conversion charter school is a little different because what they would do is take an existing facility and student body and make a proposal to use that building and some portion of the students that attend this existing school and turn that into a charter school. There are charter schools around the state, a few of them, that were established by the school district, usually because it was a very small, isolated population, and the community wanted to operate their own school. And some of those have been successful. Some of them have gone back into the school district because they haven't been as successful as they thought they would be. Other conversion charter schools are kind of hostile takeovers. And so an entity will come in and convince or try to convince the faculty and the parents that a better option would be a charter school. And that's what we saw in Alachua County this spring, which we'll talk about later. A municipal charter school is a different entity. And right now in statute, a municipal charter school, a municipality is not permitted to establish a conversion charter school. But we're going to talk about last year's legislative session too in a sec. On the next thing we kind of have to understand is a little bit about school funding. So schools in Florida are funded on a student by student basis, and we call that the FTE. We have a formula for establishing how much money a school district gets based on the students and sometimes the special student needs, like special education students or English language learners. There's a little bit of a boost there. And then there also are funds that are dedicated for very specific purposes, like school safety, transportation, mental health, things like that. Capital outlay is used to maintain buildings and build new buildings. And so if you are a conversion charter school, then you take over the district building, and then you have to be treated within the district as if you were a district school. And so you are entitled to a mutual management plan, and you have to comply with what's called the SREF, which is the building safety standards that schools are required to follow. If you're a charter school that's not a conversion charter, there are dedicated funds that are allocated through the state legislature. And that's been a pattern for the last several years, where charter schools get allocated funds specifically for capital, for building maintenance and things like that, based on their FTE. But district schools are not awarded that same courtesy. There are also local referenda that many districts use to be able to fund some of their capital needs. And there is a discretionary millage that every district levies. And it's most districts, it's 1.5 mils based on their tax roll. In some districts, it's slightly less, but they can't exceed 1.5 mils. Recent changes to statute now require that the school district share those funds with charter schools as well as all of the other funding they have. The difference is in a charter school, they just get the money based on the FTE. In a district school, there has to be a building plan, which has been approved by the state, for them to be able to use capital outlay dollars. So they actually have to submit a plan and justify the use of the funds, no matter charter schools, no matter how old or new the building is, they are just given money to use for capital. There also are federal funds. And then the other odd thing that happens is that network charters are permitted to transfer funds among the members of a network. So within a district, they can transfer and it's unrestricted. Within a state, they can transfer, and it's called an unforgivable loan. But you can send money from Miami to Alachua County as part of a school project if you are a charter school. So now that we've got kind of the basis for how charter schools work, then let's talk about charter school conversion. So if you want to establish a charter school and you want to use a school district building to do that, then we have a set of laws that govern how that works. So you have to apply for a conversion charter, and then you have to hold a vote. The vote is held among only parents and teachers who are part of that particular school. And there are a kind of a sketch in statute and very, very detailed procedures in State Board of Education rule. And we will talk about that. But there are a couple of controversies involved in the Newberry decision and the state rules as opposed to the state law. And so I think Tyler will share a little bit when we get to talk about Newberry. He's going to share a little bit about both the majority, the rule about at least 50% versus a majority, and also the teachers who are permitted to vote. And then finally, if the entity that is, well, the school district determines that the move to change a school to a conversion charter has passed, at that point, then the charter school organization, whoever's trying to establish the charter school, has to complete a plan, which is then filed with either the school district or the Charter Review Commission, who then will review the plan. And if they approve it, then the charter school can open. They can open after the plan approval, but they are allowed to defer opening for up to 3 years after the approval process. A charter school can close at will after they have a public hearing. And so that's a little bit different than what we see in a regular school district. Now, one of the things that some of our legislators wanted to change last year was a bill called HB 109, which is also SB 246. Both of these bills were proposed in the legislative session, and they were paired. They're very, very similar. The changes they would have made to the process would have been, number one, to allow a municipality to be an entity to apply for a conversion charter. So a city or town could say, I want this school or that school, and go ahead and try to organize a conversion charter vote. The second part of the bill is that it removed the teachers from the balloting process. So only parents would be part of the decision to go to a conversion charter, even though the teachers are employed at the school. It would allow one application for any or all public schools within the jurisdiction, the boundary. And so there you could apply for 1, 2, however many are within that municipality. And then it also did kind of a taking kind of a process. So if you had a school building that was vacant and you'd had a declining enrollment by at least 1% for 2 years in a row, then you had to make that facility available for a charter school, and you would not be permitted to charge the charter school or the governing body for any rental, leasing, or usage fees. They would just get to take that portion of the campus. It could be one building on a campus, or it could be a whole campus. So that's what kind of prompted this discussion, was the Newberry controversy and also our concern about the legislative proposal. And so at that point, what I'm going to do is pass the discussion on. And so I'd like to introduce our guests, because we have some fabulous moderators and fabulous guests tonight to be able to talk about the actual process. Our moderators are Dr. Jill Lewis-Spector and Damaris Allen. Dr. Lewis-Spector has had a distinguished career as a professor of literacy education in New Jersey, and she's now in Florida and is the first vice president of the League of Women Voters of Florida, and is also co-chair for both the Sarasota and the state league's education action teams, and leads the discussion statewide about education policy. Damaris Allen is Executive Director of Families for Strong Public Schools and is a strong advocate for greater parental engagement in decisions that affect the quality of our public schools. So those two will be the moderator tonight. But I'd also like to introduce to you from Newberry, Tyler Forrest, who is co-chair of Save Our Schools Newberry and field staff for the AFL-CIO in Gainesville. He was born and raised in Alachua County and remains a member of the Newberry community and actually attended all 3 of the schools that were proposed to be part of the conversion process. So he has certainly a invested status in this community. Melissa Hawthorne will also be joining us, and she is a teacher in Alachua County and has spent some time in our Newberry schools. We also have Annette Short, who is music teacher at Newberry Elementary School and has been in Alachua County for 38 years. So certainly, again, invested in the community. We also have Kristen Main, who is a middle school teacher in Alachua County. She's in her 6th year of Florida. So we have a wide range of experience, but all invested in our Newberry community. Melissa has added in the chat also, she is co-chair of the SOS Newberry, and I neglected to copy her bio to my list, and so my apologies to Melissa. If she needs to add something when we talk, then be glad to do that. So each of these panelists and our moderators have a wealth of experience in education policy and in Alachua County and Newberry, and have lived through the conversion charter process. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to Damaris and Jill.
Thank you so much. So for our panelists, the first thing we're hoping that you can share with us is just a general overview, a quick general overview of what happened in Newberry. And then how did you end up coming together as a result of what happened?
I can start with that. So our experiences in the middle of February, we first heard about this group's, Yes Newberry, they were called, plan to take over the public schools and call for a vote to convert the public schools into a conversion charter. It took us absolutely by surprise. Did not see that coming. It was a total curveball. I think their stated purpose was that these schools are great, but parents really know best. And, these parents want change. And they kind of pointed out all of the ways in which the Alachua County School District had, in their eyes, been failing the school, like not replacing air conditioning or general maintenance, things like that. But the schools were A-B schools. Newberry Elementary was a C school last year, but they grew to an A school within the year. So they're good schools. They weren't failing schools in any way, shape, or form. They were just, there's been a lot of growth out in Newberry as a suburb of Gainesville, out towards the west part of the county. It's a more rural area, and there has been tremendous growth. Most of Gainesville's growth is moving that way. And so the schools were a little over capacity. So this group was going to do a better job than the school district. They felt the district wasn't attending to their needs. For us, we organized, for me personally, it felt very much immediately like an assault and a threat. I knew it wasn't going to be good for teachers, but more importantly, I knew it would be really bad for students, in my opinion. And we can get into that later. So one of the ways that we began to respond is Tyler and I are actually both kind of involved in union and labor issues. We both sat, we knew each other from other union and labor activism in the community. And so Tyler reached out to me immediately and said, we need to do something like this. We need to start a group. We need to organize people. And we were able to take, kind of our experience organizing in other areas and bring it to creating a group where we could kind of gather people and have a dialogue and a forum of our own to respond. So I credit it to Tyler and his organizing work that he already knew how to do that. He started websites, He started a LLC, or 501c3, sorry. He started a group, he made it official, and he brought the conversation to the community in an organized way.
And if I can just add, obviously that all of this feels like it's taken years and it hasn't, but we didn't immediately start organizing against them. We gave them a chance to make their case, if you will. We attended their informational sessions, and it just became very clear that this was not a good deal, and they were not being forthright with what was going on. And so the campaign just, it seems like an onion that we're still peeling back the layers of to today. And as far as finding people, luckily, me and Melissa knew each other. And then you just start listening, and the union helped a little with connecting us with teachers. We were able to find out, I was able to find Kristen. I can't remember where we crossed paths.
It was Facebook. I found you on Facebook.
Yeah. So, and you just start, and Miss Short, we didn't get to work together a lot, but Miss Short was actually my music teacher when I went to Newberry Elementary. So everything, it was a very full circle moment. But there was a natural group out there that did not feel that this was good. And so I just started reaching out to those people and trying to bring them in and try to get everybody kind of swimming in the same direction to a positive action that would, you know, result in something beneficial to us.
And you mentioned some of this, but what were the strategies that you used to defeat this? Were there any advocacy tactics? And if so, can you give us some examples of what worked and maybe what didn't work?
I will say the one big lesson we learned, I think, was that it would have probably been easier if we had advocated for an abstention, for parents to abstain instead of vote no. If parents had abstained, if the no parents had abstained at the elementary school, their parent vote would have failed there. So that was another lesson. And I was surprised that it seemed the top message that worked the best was actually turning around their language on them. So they call it the school choice movement. So we pointed out that when you take over all 3 public schools, you leave no public schools. So you're taking away the choice of public schools. And I found that even parents who were sending their kids to charter schools or private schools, that was still always in the back of their head that, well, there's always the public school. If something happens, if we can't afford it, whatever. And this would have taken away that choice. So it was removing school choice. And that message, I think, resonated with a lot of people.
I think another strategy was just providing, like with Tyler starting the 501c3, it provided the organization for people to come together. Whereas people might have been speaking about it in their own little silos, we had created a group where dialogue could happen. And there were people from both sides who came to this group, but we moderated it. And that's where kind of people began to organize together within the community. And the charter school conversion group held a series of community forums. And we were able to organize people to show up together and raise the talking points in that very public spotlight that we had been discussing within our group. And, you know, I'm not sure if everyone would have come and showed up and spoken out to the degree that they did if we didn't have this organizing space and this dialogue that we were having beforehand.
And we also did education sessions, if you will, kind of our own town halls, to explain to people how, to put it bluntly, they were being lied to. You know, like they were saying, all the kids, everybody, all the kids who are going there can still go there, and all the kids who move into Newberry will still be able to go to the schools. Well, if it was a municipal charter, that might be the case. So, but You have to explain the difference then to everybody between a conversion charter and a municipal charter. And I swear to you, I bet you a lot of citizens in Newberry can explain the difference in detail now because of that. And those educational sessions gave people the confidence and the talking points they needed to make the arguments themselves to their friends and whatnot.
That's fantastic. As you were speaking to families, to parents, to teachers, to students, what kind of stories did you hear about what we need to do to strengthen public schools, or people, or students who left charter schools to go back to traditional schools, or teachers? Do you have any stories that you can share with us? Some things, lessons you learned along the way?
Melissa, do you want to take this one? Or Kristen?
Well, some stories did come up. For example, I met Kristen at one of the forums that we held, and she, spoke up and said, I used to teach at a charter school, and she shared her personal experience about how that was very bad for the bad things she experienced in a charter school for herself, not having as many rights as a teacher or protections as a teacher, and also how it was not necessarily fair for the students in many ways too. She actually taught at the charter school that had a lot of controversy about the statue of David, and I'm sure you guys are all familiar with that. So
Yeah, no, I'm not so proud of that one on my resume. I did teach at a charter school for a year in Tallahassee. And that experience is what, when I heard this news that, and I heard about it like through a text message, and then there was like a live stream. It very much was sprung on everybody in the community. And it was very professionally done. I think that needs to be brought up, that this wasn't a grassroots organization led by parents. This was funding. They had funding, they had a spokesperson, they had branding, they had things ready to go. It was all rolled out all of a sudden. It was in front of City Hall. I immediately started questioning, because I had been told things at my previous charter school that never came to fruition. Things that just never happened, promises that were never kept. A lot of issues with money, a lot of issues with staffing, a lot of issues with, there was no transportation provided at that charter school. And so I immediately started asking, my first question was, how are you going to reduce overcrowding? Because that was one of the first things they really campaigned on, was overcrowding. And my question was, how are you going to do that? And the answer was, we're just going to have less students. And I was like, so you're going to kick kids out? No, everyone's going to be able to attend. Okay, how are you solving overcrowding? I just kept asking. And once I realized that I was getting some negative reactions to my pushback, I kind of stepped back, as I was still working, professionally with a lot of people. And so I kind of didn't, I kind of reached out to Tyler and Melissa at that time to speak to other people who I felt like were thinking very critically about this situation and what this might mean, ramifications for students. And so that's it was my experience with the past charter schools that led to me exploring who else is maybe questioning about this and who might be able to help me figure this out. No, my charter school was not a heritage school. It was a Hillsdale classical charter school. Oh, they've been dropped. They were dropped for problems because they did have problems.
Didn't you get a mailer too, Kristen, when it was announced?
Yeah, I was sent a photo of a mailer that had already been made that they didn't send out until months later.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So there was some planning.
Yeah, to her point about it being a professionally produced, we were able to get a hold of their strategic planning document that laid out the person running it. He was paid $20,000 for leadership, and their entire budget was about $180,000. So it was a very, well-financed effort.
We also saw in the organizing document that they had a plan to recruit parents who would sign their names to initiate this vote, because it has to be parent initiated. So that led us to believe that it wasn't an idea that came directly from the parents themselves, but possibly from a much more well-organized outside entity.
Yeah, the mayor continually, and to this day actually, claims that a small group of parents came to him. Unfortunately for him, I have a copy of the strategic planning document, which shows him and the campaign manager were assigned to recruit 3 to 5 families per school that would be willing to sign their name to such a letter.
Yeah, and when they were campaigning, it was also a bit odd because it's 3 different schools they were wrapping into. So all 3 schools got a separate letter for the charter conversion. So all 3 had to have separate votes. And there were problems that were happening at elementary school, problems that were happening at the high and at the middle. So there are like valid complaints. I think every school in the world probably has valid complaints towards their school board about problems that are ongoing at the school. I've now worked at 5 schools and every single one of them has had terrible problems in different ways. And each of them deals with it in different ways. And there were problems like at the elementary with a very extreme overcrowding that weren't happening at the middle and high, and were sometimes by the campaign being prescribed or being told to parents that like this was a problem that needed to be solved at our school. Like I believe one of the families at my middle school was at the meetings speaking about how like you're talking about how you're going to help with discipline and students won't behave as badly. But statistically, our middle school had hundreds of less referrals than we had the previous year. So we were already taking care of that problem that they were claiming existed there that didn't. So there was almost this like manufactured problems at our schools when really I think many were just very upset with our school board. When, like we said earlier, our schools were B's and A's and C's at the C's at the lowest, and it was an A this year. So there really weren't problems happening in the school board or at the schools the way things were being claimed.
So I guess I have a few questions. What you've done is absolutely amazing. The way you have been so powerful and working with parents and getting organized. I'm just wondering, it couldn't have all been that easy. There must have been something that was a little bit difficult, and you might have said, gee, if only this were available, or I could have done that. What would have made it easier for you to fight off the efforts to do this conversion? And
I give a joke answer, then someone can give a serious answer, which is $120,000.
Kristen, you had, not Kristen, Annette. Yes, you have your hand up.
Well, and one of the things too, as a teacher I was at the elementary school, and we had literally half and half of our faculty, half was for it and half was against it. The half for it were very vocal, sent stuff home to parents of their classrooms. And then those of us who were not for it had to be more cautious because we were in a no-win situation. Because if you told a parent how you felt about it, half of your parents would be happy you felt that way, and the other half of your parents would be super unhappy you felt that way. And I also want to point out, when all this was happening, I went to my principal and I said, I want to ask you, have any of these parents who have signed on this charter come to you with any issues or concerns about our school? And she said, no, not one of them. So they did not bring it to the school level at first. And I agree, this was definitely organized by somebody other than these parents. These parents were the face to meet the letter of the law. And it has devastated our school.
I was going to say the exact same thing. And that for me, what was as a teacher at the high school, where the vote lost among the teachers, what was very difficult for me was so many, as you said, being on the no side, the yes teachers were very vocal. The no teachers did feel, I don't know why, but it was harder. I think we wanted to not jeopardize our relationships with families or students. And so we talk about this isn't political, but on another hand, it is in a way of you have to take a stand. And what would have been easier for me is if I felt very lonely as a teacher in my school, and it really divided our school big time. And we were all having, discussions, kind of like, which side are you on? But speaking out publicly, a lot of people had a fear to do that And one of the reasons why I was the site rep for my school. I felt like it was my responsibility as an advocate for public education. And I just kind of made my peace that I have to put my face out there and be loud about it. But it was, there was definitely a lot of difficulty for a lot of teachers to activate on that level. And I think it would have, that's what I felt was lacking. And I feel that having a stronger union would have at our school, because at our school, the union has been declining. I think that that could have had a difference. And I think the union is pretty strong over at the middle school, where a lot of the teachers are coming in from Gainesville. They're not Newberry teachers. And the union was stronger there, and the teachers voted against it at Oakview. So those are my thoughts.
Well, no one felt that way at first. I mean, it was such a well rolled out layout. And I mean, I think people want to believe what they're promising, to hear that you're going to make that much more money, and to hear that the behavior is going to be better, and that we're going to have more control over curriculum. And I mean, these are all things that everybody wants. It's an amazing thing to sell people. It's the, actually doing it that's really hard, it turns out. I was very scared to speak out in the beginning about, how I really felt about it. I was also really upset because I loved my job. I loved my school. I loved my coworkers. I loved some of the people that were for it. And I could, to some extent, understand why they were for it. It's an amazing thing to want better education for your kids. But once it became really clear that, like, feasibly this was not going to work, and people wouldn't own up to some of, like, the real facts of, like, budgetary concerns and stuff, I did choose to finally speak out about it. But it was at the possibility of, like, well, I knew I was sacrificing any future job I would have if it did convert. So the reality is Newberry is decently far away from Gainesville. And many teachers or people who live in that area don't even live necessarily in our county, and either have exemptions for their kids to attend those schools, or are far away from every other school that they could transfer to in the district. So there was a very real threat of, like, if I speak out against this, I'm not going to have a job at this charter, even if they say I do. So that's where a lot of people, I think, were pretty afraid. And then the real-time fracturing of decades-long friendships, of relationships, of trust in the community as a whole. It was really tough to choose to speak out against it. I can't think of what would have made it easier. Once I did, like, once I was the one who stood up and spoke out, I heard from so many people that they were against it. It was like everybody was afraid to be the first one to say it. And then once there was, like, a spearhead or a figurehead, they were like, oh, okay, yeah, I feel the exact same way. And everyone was just too quiet or afraid to say it. But I don't know how you give that to somebody. It takes a little bit of chutzpah.
Yeah, it sounds like it must have been a really challenging experience. And what's going to happen this school year when you have a divided staff and parents, and what will happen next? Are there other issues, and I'm curious about this, in Alachua County's district, are there other issues that the schools are having? And will you guys be working together on any of those? Are you going to stay together as a group? What do you think?
I think we will stay together as a group. Some issues that our county is facing is they've kicked the can down the road for years and years about rezoning. And so there needs to be comprehensive rezoning, but that's not a very popular subject. So we have a lot of schools that are over capacity and a lot of schools that are under capacity, but no one wants to rezone. Part of the reason possibly behind that is that our county has historically, I think in all of Florida, it has one of the largest gaps between incomes. And we see a lot, we also have at the same time, we have the largest achievement gap in the state. And so these are some issues that the county is facing. I think we have created now kind of a forum to have these discussions. And I think it has continued, it's continued to be active. One of the things that I think spurred this charter school conversion is trying to exempt themselves from being affected by zoning, the parents who were in support of it. Also, we kept hearing what to me felt like a very big dog whistle. They kept saying, the supporters kept saying, the discipline will be better, the discipline will be better, the discipline will be better. And my thoughts are, well, how and why? Are you going to systematically unenroll students who have, behavior and attendance issues? And so all of that goes hand in hand, and are issues that we still have to organize to improve.
Well, it
Yeah,
sounds like- oh, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna add, I wish we could just wrap it up, but unfortunately the saga continues, as they're trying to change this rule, they're changing it specifically so that this group can submit an application. The city of Newberry's already authorized $120,000 of taxpayer money to be spent at the lawyer they used, the Education First Newberry campaign used, to submit the charter application. So the saga continues, unfortunately. We'll wait to see, but we're going to stay around and we're going to continue hammering them on this. And they also have elections coming up. So we'll be around.
Good to hear. Your vote is your voice, right?
That's right.
I'm glad you're going to be around. You've probably learned a lot from this experience. And we'd love to hear some of the lessons that you've learned that you'll be using going forward and that will benefit everybody who's on this webinar tonight.
Well, real quick, I just want to thank some of the people I see on this call, because we actually have quite a few of the parents that were part of the group, and they really were the soldiers of this. They were the ones talking to other parents, talking to other teachers, and persuading them. So thank you, Brandy. Thank you, Jessica, Travis. And I saw other people I thought, and please forgive me if I forget you, but finding a group of parents, forgive me, I'm not trying to, I'm obviously a man, I'm not trying to bash men, but the moms group really came together and they did not let this go. Like Melissa said earlier about packing the meetings, Brandy was not afraid to go up there and ask this obviously very slick, polished professional. The guy was the spokesman for Evan McMullen's campaign. So, I mean, he was a very slick speaker. He always had an answer. But Brandy wasn't afraid of him, and she held him to it, and then would go back to him and say, well, wait a minute. You say that everybody, like Kristen said, you say that you're going to solve overcrowding, but how are you going to solve overcrowding, not build anything on the school, and not kick anybody out, and let everybody who comes in? So they really held their feet to the fire. So I just want to thank all you guys for that, because yeah, I would not have happened without all of you. And you too, Kristen, Melissa, Ms. Short. As far as, I'm sorry, what was your question? What was?
Any lessons that you've learned that you can share with us that you'll be using going forward? What I'm hearing right now is get a real strong group of parents together. That's the first thing you need to do. Yeah.
Well, and like Melissa said about redistricting or rezoning, nobody likes rezoning. We're kind of going to have to be the pro rezoning group in a way, because that's the only way to solve the overcapacity issue at the elementary school. That was a huge driver of this issue, right? That was one of the main discontents, if you will. And it's real. It's hard. You can't deny it. They're overcrowded. You got kids eating lunch at 10 a.m. So there has to be some group saying that, yeah, we don't like rezoning either, but it has to be done. It has to be done because it's what's good for everybody. And it's how we're going to, continue functioning.
I also think continuing like on a larger sense, obviously there's things we can do once this is like, what's it called when it gets started? Like when the parent sends the letter, like once this is put in motion, There's nothing anyone can do to stop it, and it can happen. It can be done every 365 days by that group. But theoretically, based on the way this legislation is written, people will get slammed by multiple groups in the same year. Like, what really needs to change is the upper levels of this, like, legislation. I think what you were speaking about earlier with what was proposed with the House Bill 109 to take away teachers' voice. I mean, the fact that the other people who work at our school, admin, janitorial staff, the food service workers, all of whom rely on this as their, financial means for independence, don't have any say in it. And for parents to be the only ones that have a say, and for it to be a very small minority, 26%, to be able to pass this, really is undemocratic. And I think continuing to hammer that home to anybody at the state level who will listen is really where we can stop anybody from having to deal with this in the future. That's what I'll continue to do. I bother everybody I can about it because it was so disruptive to our school year. Between the tension between parents, the amount of money and time that our administration had to put into the voting process, the tension, it was the stress on the kids. I'd really like for this to just stop overall. But that's more of a long shot. When it comes to actually dealing with this when it happens, it really is finding the like-minded people in the community. I think that's where organizations like unions and like so I'm sorry, Damaris, I don't remember the exact name of your organization, but Parents for Strong Education, something along those lines. Those groups stepping up to help with the organization that they already have, it would be extremely helpful to when responding to such a well-funded, very well thought out campaign. I mean, run by a professional campaign manager.
Right.
And
then,
And I think too, I want to thank the parents, because without them, I think I would have lost my mind. But we have to know our politicians and how they stand before we vote. And we have to make sure that they're educated about education, because I have talked to several politicians, and what they view education as is not what's happening, at least at Newberry Elementary. And so I think everybody, all of us, teachers, support staff, parents, this is our school. It's our kids. We know what's best. And we need to stand up and tell them that and make sure they're ready to listen when we're saying, no, what you're doing is not right. But I think we have to have the energy to stand up and say it. And at the end of the day, we are all extremely tired. We all have very busy lives, but our children are important. So we have to do it for them. And I agree with the support staff. We had our media specialist teaches as many classes a day as I do. She sees as many children a day as I do. And she did not get a vote, strictly because of how the statute and the rule is written. And if all of those teachers who were not allowed to vote had been allowed to vote, we would not be where we are. And so I think taking people's rights away, I think anybody who works at that school who counts on it as a livelihood, whether you're a bus driver or the custodian or the lunchroom staff or a para, they deserve a vote too. I think the statute does need to be rewritten, and I think all of those people need to be included in it. But I think if we don't reach our politicians, that is not going to happen. And I agree, we have to be a loud voice, because if we're not loud and united, they're not going to listen.
Yeah, because as it stands, the ruling or the statutes surrounding this law are becoming even more undemocratic. So it is a real concern.
Yes.
I would agree. I also learned that, like Kristen already said, that when 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 people speak up, it turns into hundreds, and it gives people that courage to join. And so having the initiative to organize that space and take that and be loud about what matters, I think gives other people the freedom and the bravery to do the same thing. And that really turns into a snowball effect. The other thing is having strong existing relationships with the union. Archer Elementary had a very strong PTA, and the PTA leader became very involved. And so had that work, had the PTA not been so strong, that would have been a missing piece of the puzzle that was really important. I feel like we missed some things about this charter school. The whole Archer situation was a really big deal. I want to just back up and give a little more context. When the group, I'll do it quickly. When the group initially revealed their plan, they were going to, they said, reduce the zoning after a year and make it more exclusive to just the city of Newberry, which turned this other city of Archer that's about 20 miles from Newberry, 15 miles from Newberry, and has always been like they've always been part of the Newberry school system historically for generations. That caused a lot of bad faith among the Archer community, that they had not been included in the conversations. The charter school group was unable to guarantee busing for students. And the end result of this, I mean, just as the way it affects students and families, is if they reach their set capacity in a year as a conversion charter school, they do not have to take all of the students in the zone. And so they can set a capacity, and then it turns into a complete lottery. So you could end up being a family in the city of Newberry who lives next to the school, and you could be denied to go to that school because it became a lottery. And so there were just a lot of issues that we were able to figure out and bring to the forefront and talk about as a group. So having those strong relationships, those strong organizations, strong unions, strong PTA, and then in the absence of all that, creating your own group and finding that by being loud, it matters.
Well,
If
I
I
learned
could,
a lot.
sorry, if I could add,
And
the
so-
Archer thing didn't happen by accident. You, like Ms. Short said, you've got to lobby your politicians. And in some cases, you even have to write the resolutions for them. But if they pass it, it's all good.
Well, and we had a PTO, but I feel like that they were brought in earlier than a lot of the rest of us knew, and they were courted and told things. And so they were on board with yes. And some of the teachers the same way. And so it felt like you had been attacked by a family member. You were attacked within because they went after certain people, and the plan was laid out long before most of us even knew anything was up. And that has made it very difficult being able to trust and work with people. And so, you know, it's that the union, those people who were union, they're strong in our school, the ones that are, but we only had about half. And so, and people believed, like you said, you want to believe that we'll be paid more and that you'll have all of these things, you know, you'll be teaching in this wonderland and everything will be wonderful. And those of us who've been in education long enough know, okay, that's not all going to happen. So what isn't going to happen? And one of the first things that I pointed out to my group, my team, which is the specials team, is that the school that they touted and showed as being so wonderful was in the red, and teachers had to take pay cuts. New teachers like $3,000, but if you were a veteran teacher, you lost a third of your salary. And so when I pointed that out, and the fact that we would be the first to go because we're specialists and they can cut us, then, you know, that kind of made a difference too. But people wanted to believe because it sounded great. So who wouldn't want that? And so I'm not sure how we prepare, you know, and get people to understand that if it sounds too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true.
I think bringing this to the attention of as many people as possible, that this can be used in a sort of nefarious or a way of taking control, is really another thing that I think is very important. Because by the time that we had heard that this was being announced, they had already had moderators in every single city Facebook page, spoken to the PTO, gathered large groups of parents at home meetings, spoken to teachers at different schools that they considered leaders. So there is already like a concerted campaigning effort before I would say a majority of people were aware of it. I think they knew who not to pick to speak to because people would speak out, but there were a couple people who were like, I was against this and I wish I had spoken out. So I think if more people knew, like if I knew what this charter conversion was before it happened, I would have been screaming it from the rooftops. Hey, there's this group and they're trying to do this, to at least give people some forewarning. So that would be something I think groups could do.
You guys are going to be
What's,
a tremendous resource for everybody as we face more and more of districts faced with issues of conversion. I know. Damaris probably has another question or two for you.
I actually don't have another question. We do have questions in the chat. What I would like to do, because we are out of time, is email them to you and see if you could get us back the answers, and we will email out any unanswered questions to the participants along with this Zoom. I also want to really encourage those of us that are on this call to do a couple of things. One, don't wait until a charter conversion comes to your district to organize and support public education. As you heard, they were well organized before we even knew they were going to get started doing this. So it's really important for parents, teachers, community members to come together and support our local public schools, because they really do impact all of us and they need all of our support. Also, a friendly reminder that HB 109 and SB 246 will probably come back by a different name and a different number. And so legislative session, while session begins in March, we will start to see bills in January. They will start moving through committees. They'll have interim committee weeks. And so please pay attention when there are calls to action, respond, make phone calls to your legislators, let them know that this is not good for kids and this is not good for our community. So it's so important to stay informed. We did a call to action on that when the conversion charter bill was moving forward. We posted it on an evening before it went to went for its second committee stop, and over 5,000 people emailed by that morning. So if you would like to be notified when that comes up again, please, Amy Marie dropped our website in there. Just sign up and we will send you email updates. And then also remember, school board elections are nonpartisan and they are open to everyone, and they happen on or before August 20th. So we want to encourage everyone to vote, to get engaged, to be involved, and make sure that they know who our pro public education candidates are and that they support them. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Oh yes, and join your PTA. I'm going to give that plug as well, because I did see that in the chat. That's how I got involved. I'm literally a parent who wanted to make kids school better for my kids, and I stayed for all kids. And it's so important. It makes a world of a difference. And together we can give our kids the public schools they deserve. So thank you so much for being here tonight. As I said, we'll gather the chat questions and send them out to you, as well as the recording. We really appreciate the work all of you did with SOS Newberry, and thank you for inspiring us and for giving us stories, and giving us hope that we can do this too. So thank you so much for joining us.
Night.
Great job. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thanks for